All right, to watch this video for Monday, October 22nd. Finally back to full-time trading on Monday. Again, I haven't really, Friday was the only day I've taken off during all the chaos that's been going on in my life for the last few weeks. It's the only day I think throughout the whole chaos that I've taken completely off. So no idea what happened Friday in the chat room. So hopefully y'all did well. But I'm looking really forward to being back. Again, I've traded here and there every day up until Friday. So I'm kind of proud of myself that that's the only day I took off throughout all this. And we'll talk more about that Monday after the close if you want to come to our little happy hour where I'm just going to talk about what's been going on. And again, I'm just so psyched to be back trading full time starting Monday. So appreciate everybody's patience with me. And the understanding and everything else. You guys have been great. So I will see y'all Monday morning. But let's get into the watch list for Monday. So the SPY still kind of looks like, hit this big sell-off here. Kind of looks like a bear flag. And it looks like it's trying to roll over again. You've heard me say this a million times. I'm not a big fan of trying to predict the overall market, even based on a chart pattern that I see forming, whatever. The overall market with the propensity of news, possibility of different kind of news stories coming out in the macro political environment, everything, anything can happen. So the SPY chart doesn't mean that much to me as far as, hey, I think we're looking bearish or I think we're looking bullish right now, because it can all change literally in a 5-minute news blurb. So I'm just going to continue to do what I always do, and that is build a watch list every night for the following day, plus a morning gap playlist before the opening bell, and then trade those on an intraday basis if I get an A+ setup, and back to cash before the closing bell, right? Which is why I'm sitting at highs for the year in my account, right? Steady climbing equity curve if you can do that. So what am I watching for Monday? Let's go CPH, and I've got a couple really weird ones, but I still think they're worth having on watch. CPHI, all the Chinese stocks went nuts last week, and then a lot of them are coming all the way back down. This one moved so nicely from 25 cents to 84 cents, and I'll show you at like 15-minute candles. Look at that move. And it even had a nice secondary bounce, nice tertiary bounce, where it actually took out the highs of the second bounce, or the first bounce. Anyway, I might have misstated that. Anyway, and then it looks like on Friday, gapped up and then kind of grinded lower all day. So when I look at the daily chart, what I've got is a big volume move where it closed well off of its highs, right? So kind of maybe even shorts were winning when it closed this day, right? But then it gaps up and then shorts are in trouble, but then it sells off again, closing about where it closed on Thursday, So I don't look at this chart and say, hey, this is a great long. I also don't look at it and say it's a great short. I look at it and say, hey, this is a recent high flyer, with passion coming into the stock, and it's still well off of its lows. It's also well off its highs. As a day trader, it doesn't cost me anything to have this on a chart, and we might get a low risk setup and maybe a 15 to 20 to 30 to 40% move in 15 minutes. So when I know that a stock has the ability to possibly give me that, especially if I get an A+ setup, I got to have it on watch. All right. ALT, I don't look at this chart and think it's beautiful, but keep in mind this thing ran from $4 one morning till the very next day, $36 on an intraday basis. And the only reason I point that out, I'm not suggesting it's going to do that again. I point it out because this huge move scrunched all these candles together, right? So this doesn't look like much of anything, but when we switch to 15-minute candles, you'll see why it's interesting to me, right? So you had massive volume here, and on this day, these are 15 minutes. So it opened at 399 this day. This would have been October 16th, right? Opened at 399, sold off and went down to 385, and then ripped. So from 385 to 495 all in one session, actually in a little over an hour. And then since then, you follow my mouse cursor here, it's kind of flagging or coiling. It could break the other way too, but I still think it's worth having on watch. It looks like it was actually, when you consider a fairly weak day on Friday for the market, this thing was actually pretty strong. It looks like it took off out of the gate, flagged, took off again, and then tried to roll over and closing above its open. So for me, this is worth watching as a potential long. But when you look at the daily, you don't see it, right? You got to kind of zoom in using 15-minute candles because of that big move back earlier about a month before. VTVT also held up pretty well in a weak tape. You had this huge move back here, lower high, then it gapped up right here above this lower high, pulled back, and I actually had this on bounce watch going into Friday, but again, I didn't trade on Friday. And it looks like it had pretty good relative strength compared to the overall market. It looks like it shot out of the gate and really held up fairly well. So I think this one also, sorry about that, I think this one also worth watching on Monday. AGRX popped back here, took it out here a little bit, took out these highs this day, pulled back, and then ripped to new highs again, new recent highs, pulled back, held the 8-day, and I also kind of like the fact that this topped out right under a buck. You know, I love inflection, whole number inflection points. The whole number $1 might come into play on Monday, and the most recent high is $1.30. So maybe we'll get a setup through a buck. We'll see, right? It all depends on what happens once the market opens on Monday. TROV has been pretty darn strong lately. Had this pop, pulled back, and then ended up making a move all the way to $1.30 on Thursday. On Friday, had a high of $1.21 before closing at $1.10. There's 15-minute candles. So you still have like a strong move, then the gap up, and you could still argue kind of a trend line here. If it gets up to this area, it might test these recent highs. I'm not in love with this one, but it's still been pretty darn strong, so we're going to watch it. YECO. This made one of those, I don't know any other way to put it. It's not a very professional term, but I'm going to call it a stupid move. From $1.73 to $13.20. That was 3 sessions ago. Then the next session, it actually hit $17.87 before finally falling apart. So now you had the big sell-off that day after hitting $17.87, then the gap down and more selling on Friday. Now, I don't look at this and think, okay, now it has to bounce. But because it made such a crazy move and it's a low float stock, if we get an A+ setup, we might get a $1, $2, $3 move. You know, on a stock at this price could be a really nice trade. So I do have to have this on watch. It's also declining volume on the pullback. I can't look at this chart and say, oh, I love it through 8, or I love it through 7, or I love it if it gaps down to 5. I don't know what it's going to do on Monday. But I do know once we see what it's going to do on Monday, I do know what an intraday A+ setup looks like. So again, this is another one. Has to be on a chart if you're a day trader, especially if you like to trade the small caps like I do, okay? ABIL. Huge pop back here, then a lower high here, then another lower high. Tried to take out this lower high and did so actually on an intraday basis on Friday. And I also kind of like the fact that it kind of topped out right around a whole number 5, closing all the way down at 4 though. But nice volume for this stock. Certainly has to be on watch for all the reasons I gave on the other stocks. This is how I build my watch list. Now I don't like this one very much, FTFT. But it did have an intraday range of 124 to 203. That's a huge range. Extra volume. It's, again, I don't know if it was just running on, hey, here's a Chinese stock that hasn't run yet. I wasn't there on Friday. Closing somewhere around the middle of its range. But I am going to watch it. Not in love with it. SLS. Also don't love this one, but it did have a nice move from basically a 3-day move from 130 to 230 in 3 sessions. And now you've got a couple red days. Closing at $1.56, so it's almost round tripped, which makes me like it a little less. But you could also argue it's coming down to test the 20-day, pretty close to the 20-day. So it certainly had big volume 3 sessions ago. So I'm going to have it on watch. I don't know. I'm not in love with it. And then CRMD, really strong stock back here, and now has pulled all the way back down, kind of near this. Last time it tested support, or last time it bounced, was right in this area. So maybe it's going to retest this bounce area. I don't know. I certainly don't love this, but at the same time, it's a stock that's $1.23. It's just fallen from 240, and it does make big moves at times. I'll hover over this candle and show you that $1.40 to $1.92. That's a huge percentage move in one day, and then the very next day, probably an equal percentage move. So now that we've got this big pullback, it is worth watching. In addition to this list, I'm going to add, pre-market gappers on Monday. And that's really, to be honest with you, that's plenty to watch. Again, I appreciate everybody's patience the last few weeks, and I'm finally back to full-time. So I'm looking forward to it. If you're not yet a member of GreatStockPicks.com, look at that link down below. We've created a way to get you involved for only $79, which I literally call an almost free trial, because it really is. It's basically pennies to get involved in a chat room that actually works together, and we teach you A+ setups, and we teach you how to trade. There's no, hey guys, I'm the moderator and I just bought XYZ, so now you should all pile in. There's a lot of dangerous stuff out there, and these guys aren't even a little bit interested in teaching you how to trade or what an A+ setup is. They're teaching you to pile in after they bought something, and if you think that's trading, you're not going to be trading very long. All right, I'm done babbling. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. We'll see everybody on Monday.